Welcome back, everybody. It's Ben from the Ben and Bev channel. This week we're bringing you a review of DC's newest film, The Batman. This newest Batman film marks the beginning of a new territory for Matt Reeves as he moves from remaking the Planet of the Apes to molding his own take to one of the world's most popular superheroes. And though we've seen a very stripped back and gritty version of it before with Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy, he planned on going even darker and grittier, as well as bringing in a lot more of the film noir and detective elements.
Has been missing from all the previous Batman films.
In fact, the main instigator for this movie is Paul Dano's The Riddler, who is actually unseen for about 3/4 of the 2-hour and 45-minute film. He really pushes the story forward because you don't really know a lot about this version of Batman, this version of Detective Gordon, played phenomenally by Jeffrey Wright, who's really in the center focus of this story with Batman and the Riddler's story dynamic. But it's the Riddler's presence that definitely carries this whole movie forward, and though Batman is the hero we're relying upon to break down this case and really figure out what it is going on and how far back the corruption in Gotham's police and political system goes. As it is an election year and we see a whole bunch of different candidates running, and as the victims are picked out, watch our attention that with each revelation, the webs that connect them reach back even farther into history and attach to Bruce Wayne in an extremely personal way. The film has garnered a lot of attention so far for its darkness, and Matt Reeves' very serious, bordering on dry, dark portrayal of this Batman story is Fincheresque in nature and feels truly noir in its design. Everything's dark, everything's gritty, not a single aspect of Gotham as a whole feels trustworthy, and Gotham itself really feels like the main character of the film, even though Batman is the eyes that we see it through. All of these different perspectives from all these different characters of Gotham really show that the heart of this whole movie is the city and its need for progress and the need of a hero for it to move forward, whether that's in the new mayor or in Batman himself. And while the movie has some absolutely phenomenal and visceral fight sequences, it's this story of espionage and political corruption that really pushes everything forward as the Riddler begins to commit these terrorist attacks throughout the city. Interesting to start this story at this point because we do kind of know Batman's origin by heart. Matt Reeves handled this version of Batman the same way that Marvel handled Spider-Man and Spider-Man Homecoming, where they don't discuss his origin in high detail since we all already know it, but they just throw you into the story and show you where he's at now that he's discovered his powers and been given that drive to become the hero that he needs to become.
Which is definitely a positive for me because seeing the Batman origin story again when we've seen it in every Batman movie, as well as hints of it in The Joker and even little bits of it in Batman vs Superman, is getting a little bit tiring after a while.
And within the 2 hours and 45 minutes of Batman we get in this movie, we only learn a little bit of how Bruce Wayne has gotten to this position. In fact, Bruce Wayne is barely a character in this movie at all. It really just is Batman as the Batman. He doesn't really function as a normal everyday citizen. The Christian Bale's portrayal of Bruce Wayne, the Nolan films, he's not really involved with his business in any aspect at all. They mention the business aspect, but it's not really a central drive to the story.
Batman is important, Commissioner Gordon, or I guess just Detective Gordon at this point.
The dynamic between the two, as well as the dynamic with Batman and Catwoman, is actually astounding. These two different couples have great chemistry between one another. Gordon acts as a really helpful sidekick to Batman. He always acts as a more reasonable voice when it comes to the law and justice as a whole. And with the dynamic with Catwoman, a friendly and flirtatious mix of the middling area of gray that Catwoman is and the good that Batman strives to be. And though she critiques him for his goodness and
My Scout-style moral,
you can tell she really cares for the guy. And it pains her to see him only care so much about his city and not care about learning about his own struggles, trauma, or much about himself at all. He really is just the costume he wears and not so much a person within Gotham as much as he is Gotham's protector. And he truly comes into that role by the time you get to the end of the movie. The story arc is actually really well handled throughout the film, and by the end of it, feel the growth with Batman.
he wants to be a hero. He's not solely just working on vengeance.
The whole movie, with all of its mixing emotions, themes, detective work, car chases, and fight scenes, is all beautifully pieced together with the glue that is Michael Giacchino's soundtrack. The different swells and just the low, monotonous hums and drums of the piano and the ambient atmospheres really add to this dark, gritty world that we find ourselves in, and he does a great job of flourishing the instruments at the appropriate moments, flashing in and out between the main Batman themes at various key points, whether it's Batman disarming Selina Kyle, the Riddler at work, or just the various ways the main theme swells in and out during that absolutely insane wrong way car chase with the Penguin. And as much of this movie as I loved, and just the whole concept behind it, the directors, the acting choice, all of that is just phenomenal. The whole vibe is just so gritty, but it isn't perfect. There's some sections in the middle where we're not really sure where exactly the story's pushing us. We're kind of waiting for the Riddler to make some moves. Not trying to give away too much here, as it is a pretty fresh movie still.
Trying to keep it as spoiler-free as possible.
And during this point in time, we actually have a lot of development between Catwoman and Batman, but makes him the true storyteller of this movie. He controls when and where things happen, and Batman really is just breaking it down along the way. Not enough is actually said to indicate this within the film, at least not in my opinion. There's not enough dialogue to carry the 2 hours and 40-something minutes in this movie that there is. And it's not just wall-to-wall action either. There's lots of scenes where characters are having conversations conversations, but it's really just
Batman looking around, or Batman looking at Selina Kyle, or Selina Kyle looking back at Batman, and only 2 or 3 words are exchanged between the few.
And while movies don't need to be bogged down with loads of dialogue, particularly superhero movies, if you're trying to handle it with a sense of serious realism, not every line needs to feel like a perfectly constructed, minimal response. Though all the lines are delivered with perfect tone, pitch, and delivery for the most part, you don't really feel the connections between some of those characters. There's some really impactful and emotional stuff in particular when it comes to Alfred's character, and he's barely in the movie. I really enjoyed Andy Serkis as Alfred, and when I saw his casting originally when this film was announced, I was extremely excited to see the way he portrayed Batman's butler.
And
his portrayal's alright, and he has a really great set of emotional performances, but you don't feel that connection between Robert Pattinson and Andy Serkis. I'm not sure if there's just a bunch of stuff that's been cut from it that kind of indicates their connection and the bond that those two have, more of the father-son dynamic that they've had as they've grown up in this period in Gotham City, but I definitely believe that there's a 5-hour cut of this movie somewhere. That rumor doesn't seem so odd now, because this 2-hour and 40-minute cut definitely had some details that kind of fell through the cracks when it came to the story coming together as a whole. My overall thoughts on The Batman were that it works as a really strong entry into the Batman franchise, and though I didn't really think it was time to give us a rehash of it, everything about this movie is where I wanted it to land. The gritty sense of realism, the just overall darkness, and a very specific aesthetic and tone that stays consistent throughout the whole movie, accompanied by a phenomenal set of actors and just an utterly astounding score. And while it is definitely a little bit bloated in the middle, I think overall we get a really unique take on the Batman genre that is as close to a comic accurate origin of him that we've seen so far.
And while this movie may have its issues, what it manages to accomplish...
The fact that they gave Matt Reeves permission to make this massive, sprawling, epic, dark piece of noir detective work. Super cool to see. One of the things I thought when I left was, as great as this movie is, I can see the even better movie that it's setting up for either its sequel or the end of the trilogy Cap.
I'm also really excited to see what HBO does with this universe, with the announcement of both a Gotham PD show and a Penguin show, as we get to see Penguin's rise to power.
Zoe Kravitz was great. The Falcone and Maroni stuff was actually really well done too. A very serious element of mob boss tied into this version of Gotham. There was some slight teases at other Batman villains. I'm not going to give away too much of them, but they definitely hint at the really obvious one, if you know what I'm saying. Oh, and I almost forgot. Robert Pattinson is Batman?
phenomenal.
The dude's voice for Batman, when he's narrating all of the case logs for how many days it's been since the Riddler started his attack, is just great. It sounds like it's ripped right out of a 40s noir movie. You'd expect him to be smoking cigarettes in a black and white office or something. Flawless. He's a very convincing Batman. His presence and just the way he devises his decisions, he really came in with a sense of commitment when it came to his vibe. As soon as he enters the scene, you're immediately focusing on him, and even if he's not in the scene, you can feel his presence over Gotham as a whole. There's a really great scene at the beginning of the movie that actually depicts this, as it shows different criminals staring into the darkness in fear that he might just come lurking out of the shadows because the back symbol is up in the sky. Really tangible feeling of dread that none of the other movies have really captured with Batman's character and hero presence over this city of Gotham. He is just as threatening as he is helpful.
A demon in the night.
Let's not forget all the tactical, gritty combat sequences, and probably one of the best car chases in recent memory.
My initial rating on my first viewing of Matt Reeves' The Batman. What did you guys think of The Pattinson? Let us know in the comments below. We'll see you next time. Ben and Bev, out.